My name is Stacy Brookhiser, and I'm here to tell you about something that's really, really hopeful and full of joy. It's called pre-implantation genetic diagnosis. And everyone in this room probably knows someone at risk who will someday consider having a family. And there are several options to consider, and one of them is pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, otherwise known as PGD. PGD involves a process that screens embryos for the HD gene. A couple must undergo in vitro fertilization to make the PGD screening possible. I know that PGD can work because I am gene positive myself, and my daughters, Roxanne and Laurel, are HD free because we were able to use PGD to ensure that they were healthy. Today I'm here to tell you about my decision to use PGD and the road I took to make that decision. I'll also discuss what the actual procedure was like in my experience. And I do want to mention that I don't have a medical degree. I'm just a layperson, and I want to recommend that the Center of Excellence is the best resource for you for these kinds of things, and especially for this kind of decision. So please refer to the Center of Excellence for any further information than what I'm going to share with you today. When I started this journey, I was newly married and I was at risk. And I hadn't tested, and I didn't know what to expect, but I knew that about the at-risk status, and I knew that if my husband and I went ahead and had children naturally, that my children, of course, would have a chance of inheriting Huntington's. And so my husband had learned a lot about HD while we were dating, and we both took this issue very seriously. So how did we proceed with this decision? We were unsure about everything, whether I should take the HD test or whether we would have to do PGD that at that time I had heard about online and not a lot of people knew about, and how we could possibly make such huge decisions because they sure seemed daunting from where we were standing. So what we did was, in order to make the decision, we first start with our personal foundation. What do we believe? We considered what we want as a family. We definitely knew that we wanted to have children. And we wanted to have children that were healthy, of course. We considered whether it's morally and ethically right to choose one embryo over another. And we also considered whether it's morally, ethically right to put a child at risk for Huntington's. There's so many different things to consider. We took our Christian faith into consideration, and I think that's important no matter what your spiritual beliefs are. Because making hasty decisions about this kind of thing can later on really have an effect. And so we needed to really take all things into consideration. And we decided that we absolutely did not want to put our kids at risk for Huntington's. And so once we had established that foundation, we were able to list our options. Could we have a baby naturally? Well, no, because we didn't want to put the child at risk. Could we get pregnant and then do prenatal testing? Well, that's an option, absolutely. But the more I personally thought about it, the more I thought I just personally wouldn't be able to do that. And then what about adoption? We thought, well, maybe that's an option if PGD doesn't work. And I questioned, well, I don't know if being at risk means that I wouldn't be an eligible person to adopt a baby. So that was a little tricky too. So we came up with our two options. Do non-disclosed PGD, which is doing PGD but not knowing whether any of the embryos actually have Huntington's. And that way you don't have to find out your own HD status, or test for Huntington's and then undergo PGD if I do have HD. So then we researched those options. We looked at our financial and emotional status. Can we afford PGD? It's pretty expensive. It can be, $10,000, $20,000 just for one try. And a lot of times the first try is not successful. And then if you are successful on the first try and you have one baby, what if you want to grow your family and do it again and have more? It can be pretty daunting. And then we researched, will our insurance help? That's a pretty big deal there, because at many insurances at first, when you first ask them, they'll just say no, or well, not for that purpose, or we only cover a little bit of this testing or something. But what we did was we called and we just asked a general question. What about this? If a person had a single gene disorder and they wanted to do PGD for that, how much would the insurance help? And so that was my initial call to the insurance. I'll go into insurance information a little bit later, because I do have a little bit of help on that. But part of my research, though, was calling and asking what is their rule about IVF and PGD and paying for it. Okay, other research that we did was, what kind of emotional support do we have from family and friends, because it's not an easy thing to go through. And also, how would this affect our family and friends, especially those who are personally affected by Huntington's? That's definitely a consideration, because there are a lot of family members that may have their own opinions about this. Also, we researched, is there a good fertility specialist in our area? What are their costs? What are their payment options? Does this doctor have experience with doing PGD for Huntington's, or maybe for another single gene disorder? All of these things are important to research before you make your decision. And then we put all of that together, and we thought about it, talked about it, prayed about it, went over it and over it, and we just didn't want to make a hasty decision. And the main question was, do I want to test? Should I get tested? Well, obviously, you hope to test negative. But if I tested positive, are there any benefits that might result from that knowledge? Well, maybe. I could prepare my family, my husband and my kids, for what could possibly happen in the future. I could set up our finances so that we're taken care of. And I could take supplements and keep healthy and work out in order to try and extend my life. Maybe there are some benefits to it. But would I be able to remain a happy, optimistic person if I knew that someday I could develop symptoms? Well, that was a big question. And so we considered, well, what about non-disclosed PGD? And I know a family who did non-disclosed, and they were successful. And non-disclosed, for anyone that doesn't know about it, basically what happens is you don't take a test, and you don't know whether you have the HD gene personally, but you go through in vitro and then the PGD process, and in the end you are not told any information about how many embryos there originally were, how many were tested, how many came out healthy or not. All you know in the end is how many healthy you have. And so you're not told whether there were any that were not healthy that they had to discard. And so that is definitely an option, and really something serious for everyone here to consider. So I thought about that, but me personally, I'm a realist, I'm an analyst, I think about all these things, and I was really concerned about paying the money when it may not be necessary. And just personally, I didn't feel good about that. And I knew that we weren't likely to get help from insurance if I hadn't tested for HD. And so also, if I have the gene, then doing non-disclosed won't change that. I still would develop symptoms someday, and really paying to do it would keep me in the dark. So is it worth the $20,000 or more to do non-disclosed in order to stay in the dark? I had to think a lot about that, and just personally, I decided that getting the test was right for me. So I made a plan. Decided what to do, how to do it, and what a big deal for me was preparing for the recovery, actually. I kind of prepared for if I'm HD positive. I made a plan. I collected all kinds of research articles and information from websites, and also looked at what kind of supplements will I take if I'm HD positive, if it turns out that way. I prepared myself. I had this big, thick book that was my HD positive plan, and I had it all colorful and everything and positive, and so that literally it was a list of things to do if I was so devastated that I didn't know where to start living again. And I took that book with me when I got tested, and so that I would know, okay, well, at least I can read this book and it'll tell me what to do, and I need to, okay, eat healthy and, you know, take fish oil and all the things that we talk about, you know, that can help. And just for me personally, that was a way, something to kind of hold on to. So once you make your plan, then just take action. Go and take the test, or plan for, you know, what you decide to do. And for me, I took the test and it was bad news. But then it was time to just keep moving forward. I mean, time goes on, and we took a little time to recover, and then we went to the doctor and we began the PGD process. And I'll go into that, all the nuts and bolts of that, in a moment. And it really gave me hope, because we were excited about the possibility of becoming parents, and for us it turned out to be a joyful experience and very, very successful. And I was very fortunate that on the first try we got twins, and because I've always wanted to have 2 kids, and somehow it just worked out really wonderful for my family. Look at me, I'm gonna cry, I love them. But it doesn't always happen that way, though, so that's something for everyone to consider here. It doesn't always happen that way. And then after that, you've got to let your good decision heal your heart. It takes a long time, and I mean, I still have a lot of days where I'm down about it, but after a few years especially, you know, really, after a few years after taking the test, you come to this point, I think, where you realize that, wow, I have all this time. I have time. It's not like I got a diagnosis that, okay, this is going to happen right now. I have time, and wow, what a gift that is, and wow, how awesome to spend every day with my little kids, and going through all of that, you know, makes you realize that life is really special, and you got to take each day and live it to the fullest. So that's another really positive outcome, actually. It was all worth it in the end for me. I kept my optimism because of my family and my friends, and especially my husband. And part of that was me asking them to be involved. I actually had my girlfriends at one girls' night that we had, and they were talking about, what is this all about? I actually taught them all about it and told them all about what Huntington's is. And I said, well, yeah, I'm going to take this test, and if this is what happens and it comes out, you know, that I have it, I'm going to need your support. And they all kind of rallied around, but it took me asking them in order to create that support. So that's really important. And also talking with my husband and making these decisions together really made him feel like he was invested in it and he was a part of it, and really our relationship has grown as a result of all this crazy stuff. And I mean, what a blessing that through all of this we have an even stronger marriage, and you know, it's because we work together. So that's very, very important. Okay, so let's talk about in vitro. Fun with in vitro. It's very, very important to do a lot of research and find a great doctor who has a great lab. That's really important in all this. Doctors will talk about their success rates. They'll let you come and, you know, have interviews with them, and you can ask around and talk to people and do all that research that you need to do in order to find a great doctor. And once you do, the first step in my process was to have a consult with your physician. And it's an opportunity to discuss what you'll need and what you'll experience. The doctor should be familiar with PGD for single gene disorders and should have access to a great lab. Now, I'm going to be talking about 2 labs. One is the doctor's on-site lab, where the embryos are handled, where the embryos are biopsied. That is sort of the doctor's lab that should be like on-site nearby. They need to be very, very experienced, because teeny tiny embryos, and to biopsy one cell, it's so extremely delicate, and any little mistake can completely mess up the process. And really, you want to make sure that every step along the way you have people working with you that know what they're doing. So that's very important. The second lab I'm going to talk about is the PGD lab. The cell that's going to be tested is actually sent away from your area to a PGD lab, where they will then test that cell. So those are the 2 labs I'm going to be talking about. Usually the PGD lab, I know of two. I think it's Genesis, I think, and then Reprogenetics. That's the one that we worked with. I don't know if there are any others, but you'll probably want to ask your doctor, what PGD lab do you work with, and where are they, and can I call them, and can I find out what their success rates are? You know, you can ask all these things. It's important to know. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so then you move on to screening and PGD prep. The screening is basic IVF screening. They test you, they do routine blood work, they do a semen analysis. They want to make sure that there are no other fertility issues going on that they have to deal with. So they just kind of go through these routine checks. And then the PGD prep, in order for that to happen, they need to collect DNA samples from family members. And for us, they asked for my DNA, for my husband's DNA, and then for cheek swabs from family members. And fortunately, my mom and my aunt both were wonderful enough to help us out with that. And because of that, they were able to look at the DNA structure that our family shares. And this stuff is so incredible. They're able to look at that and determine, okay, yeah, we see this certain gene right here for HD gene, but are there any markers next to it that can identify that this area of that gene comes from this family line? And in our family, there's a very, very strong linked marker. And they came back, you know, pretty quickly. Usually it takes about 8 weeks to do the PGD prep. For us, it was only 4 weeks. And they called me. They're like, whoa, your family's great. This is great. And they said that because of that, it'll be 99% accurate. And they have to say 99. They can't say 100 because the 1% is for human error. And you always have to consider that, you know. They look for DNA similarities between members of the HD-affected family. It includes the HD gene itself and/or a marker. A marker is a gene that is next to the HD gene and is inherited together. They'll compare that with the DNA structure of the non-HD partner. Using this method, they can clearly identify whether an embryo has inherited the HD gene and marker from the HD-affected family line. And that is where the term comes in, pre-implantation genetic diagnosis. This is the test that they prepare in order to diagnose the cell from each of the embryos. Okay, so once the lab is sure that they'll be able to accomplish PGD, then they're able to move on. And you move on to the real IVF stuff. Suppression and stimulation. This is the part where the doctor, your fertility specialist, will control the female cycle in order to grow eggs. Now I'm going to use the term eggs. Sometimes here it would be more appropriate to use the word follicle, but just for ease of conversation I'm going to say eggs. Suppression. Starting with suppression, the female cycle is stopped so that the doctor can gain control. He uses birth control pills and usually Lupron or a drug like that in order to take control of that. And then you're able to move on to stimulation. The doctor uses stimulation drugs to help the ovaries grow multiple eggs in one cycle. Now, usually a woman's body begins preparing many eggs every month, and even without all the IVF stuff. This is naturally what happens. Usually the woman's body begins preparing many eggs every month, but quickly the body chooses one egg to concentrate all its efforts on. But in IVF, the stimulation drugs tell the body to continue growing all of the eggs. The doctor controls the stimulation by observing with ultrasound and then adjusting the medication so that your body is told, okay, grow more, grow less. It's very, very delicate because there's something called hyperstimulation, that if you get too many eggs growing in there, it's really bad for the female body. During this whole process, you become very familiar with needles, big ones and little ones and all of that. It's just a crazy part of the process that you just have to get used to. And then once the eggs are large enough, the HCG trigger shot is given to prepare those for harvesting. And this is just a couple days before they're ready to do retrieval. So then you move on to egg retrieval. Sometimes you're given anesthesia and sometimes not. I was, and so I was out during, I was kind of glad to be out. The doctor inserts a needle and removes all of the eggs. We had 11 eggs retrieved, and that's pretty high actually. Sometimes people have more, just a few cases I've heard of people having more. Usually it's a lot less because they want to be careful that they don't, hyperstimulate, especially if it's a cycle where they've chosen to just transfer like 1 or 2 or something. The doctor may choose to not stimulate so many and just let the body grow a couple of them. So we had 11, which was great. And at that point, after the eggs have been retrieved, 1 sperm is injected into each mature egg to fertilize it. It's called, forgive me if I get this wrong, ICSI, yeah. Intracytoplasmic sperm injection, I think, ICSI. And the sperm is injected in order to avoid having other DNA present. Because if they're going to test your embryo for DNA and for the structure, doing it the old-fashioned way, having a group of sperm around the egg, may leave fragments of DNA from the other sperm that didn't make it. And so that's why they need to just inject 1 sperm, so it doesn't cause any DNA confusion. Okay, so out of our 11, 1 was not usable and 1 didn't fertilize. So we had 9 what turned into blastocysts. Each fertilized embryo grows into a blastocyst, which is a group of stem cells. And this is the point where the PGD testing is done. On day 3, which is usually the 8-cell stage, blastocysts are biopsied and 1 or 2 cells are sent away to the PGD lab for testing. It depends on how big the blastocyst is. If it's large enough, they'll take 2. And I think we had, like of our 9, there were like 2 or 3 where they tested 2 different cells that, well, no, they're not different. They're exactly the same, actually, the stem cells. But 2 cells from that 1 blastocyst. And then the other 6, I think, just had 1 cell. But they'll take 2 if they can, because it's kind of makes for redundancy. Okay, so so that cell that is biopsied from the blastocyst is sent away to the PGD lab for testing. Okay, and the lab does a few tests. They do the original HD and marker tests that were prepared before the IVF began. And they also do a test for contamination to make sure that there's nothing else that maybe they're testing wrong, or maybe the lab person's DNA got mixed in there somehow. So they definitely test for contamination. They do not test for a CAG number. We recently found that out. But what they do is they test for that marker to determine whether that embryo came from the family line that had the HD in that family line or came from the other family line. And they do not accept any embryos that came from the HD-affected family line. Okay, the PGD report looks at all these results and only recommends transfer of healthy embryos that did not have contamination, did not have the HD gene, and did not have the family marker. So all 3 of those things need to be clean and present and good in order for them to say yes. And so in the end, our 9 blastocysts came back that 5 of them had HD. 1 of them was not testable. And so that's fine. I'd rather not take that chance if there's some contamination or something going on. And then 3 were healthy. And that was great for us because we had talked about how many will we transfer. If we get, like 25 or something, how many will we transfer? We said 3 is the magic number for us because I can't imagine more than triplets. And that in itself, now having twins, triplets is, whew, that's a lot. Okay. So after you know how many are healthy, then you can go on to the embryo transfer. That happens 2 days later on day 5. Healthy embryos are inserted using a small catheter, and I was awake for it. It was pretty cool, actually. We were able to watch it happening on ultrasound. And then bed rest is ordered for a few days, complete bed rest. And during that time, injections of progesterone and estrogen are required, and actually throughout the first trimester, in order to support the pregnancy. Because since the doctor was controlling the female body in the beginning of the process, the body doesn't really know that it's getting pregnant and that it needs to, you know, prepare itself for a baby. So those injections are really necessary. And it's very uncomfortable and a big long needle, but it's worth it because you're going, okay, it's okay, I'm pregnant, I don't mind, I'll do the injection as long as I'm pregnant. So then after that, you waiting for the pregnancy test, and then 11 days later for us, we took the pregnancy test and had twins. And really, it's a blessing. It's a really blessing. Okay, so like I mentioned before, you're not guaranteed to be successful, and that's something to consider. That you may want to talk with your partner about it before you begin the process. How many times can we try this before we're going to give up? Or what would we do if we tried once and it didn't happen? Would we then go on to another, you know, adoption or something? That's really something to consider. Like I've been saying again and again, it's very important to work with a great doctor and a great lab because they are part of this. My doctor, in addition to just being very successful and a good doctor, he also was really fun, and he always had like this great music playing, and he always, you know, gave my husband a high five whenever he'd see him, and he really made the process kind of interesting and fun for us because on those difficult days he was really upbeat, and that's kind of important because there are times during this where you're kind of really going through some emotional issues, and I mean your hormones are going wacko, and so it's important to have good support around. Okay, and embryo donation. I wanted to mention this because unused embryos can be donated to HD research, and there's a lot of discovery going on in this area. I'm sure everyone here has probably heard about all kinds of, you know, possibilities in the world of stem cells, and in our HD community there are some stem cells in existence, but they are always wanting more. And so if you go through this PGD process, I highly recommend that you donate your unused embryos to stem cell research. And my embryos actually are at the UC Irvine Stem Cell Center, and it's kind of exciting because I live down in that area, and so I know the researchers, and so I can kind of hear about, well, what's going on, and you know, is there anything happening, and what are you doing on them now? And I guess they grow and grow, and they can take one little stem cell and grow it into these huge amounts, and maybe that'll end up in a cure someday. Maybe that'll end up in some great treatment. Yeah, question.
You donated your diseased embryos.
That's right. That's right. All of our unused, even the one that was not testable or contaminated, we donated that one too. We're like, take them all. I have the information on that. If anyone wants to do that or needs information on it, you can email me, stacybrook@aol.com. That is also on my website, the hdfreewithpgd.com. And there's an email on this too, but you can just email me directly. My email, stacybrook@aol.com, is on the website too. So you can email me for all this information. Okay, so yes, embryo donation. Very good idea. Okay, let's talk for a moment about financial assistance. When I first went to my insurance, they said no, no way, we don't cover IVF. That's what they called it, IVF. And I said, well, okay, who can I talk to, you know, beyond this? Can I talk to someone who, you know, deals with appeals or something? And so they gave me to another person. And I kind of explained it a little bit better. Well, it's not really infertility. It's sort of a, you know, major medical, they called it. They ended up calling this major medical in my insurance personally. What we ended up doing was we wrote a letter trying to convince them that it is medically necessary, and that was the term that I was told to use. I had my doctor write a letter and talk about what this would do, and that because of the HD in the family, this would help protect, and da-da-da. And part of what I wrote in that letter was I talked about, well, if I had children that ended up inheriting Huntington's, and if they had symptoms, especially if they had it when they were children and our insurance was responsible for them, this is what it would cost per year, and the average lifespan times this, times the 0.5 chance of them having it, times this many kids, and it was like over $1 million, you know, this is what you would have to pay. And I'm like, well, the little tiny cost of PGD, it's only like $20,000 or so. It's so much better. So why don't you pay that now? Then you won't have to pay $1 million later. And so all of this, you know, conversation and letter writing and all of that, we ended up getting coverage for it. We got about 70% because it fell under our major medical category. And we sort of ended up falling into a loophole for them. And they said, well, we'll give you one try. And after that, we're not going to do IVF for any reason, for anyone anymore. And that's what they said. Well, fortunately for us, we got twins on the first try, so that was great. But then a few years later, there was a couple that also works for my husband's employer, same insurance company, and they wanted to do PGD for a different disorder, not for Huntington's, but you know, there are many, many diseases and disorders that PGD can help. And so we helped them, and we said, well, you need to go to this person and write a letter and do this and tell them this. And they actually had to go before a board and present it and talk about it. And they were given 100% coverage. Yeah. And now they have a baby boy right now, and it's just exciting. But it takes a fight. And so it's possible that even if your insurance says, no, we won't cover it, go ask whoever you can. Find out the name of a person who's responsible for, you know, whatever it would be, the appeals, I guess. Somebody in the office that would know, you know, and get their name and their phone number and call them and say, hey, you can really help me. I did that with someone in our insurance, and it kind of became personal because she heard what I was trying to do, and she was really trying to help us. And now I send her a Christmas card every year with a picture of our family because I'm so thankful that she was helpful like that. And I think that many people, when hearing about what you're trying to do, would really try to help you. So usually with insurance, you know, you can at least make an attempt to do that, especially if you've gone the route of testing for Huntington's, and then your children would have a 50% chance of getting it. You know, I think the insurance kind of stands up and says, ooh, I don't know, maybe we need to pay for this. On my website is an example, a copy of that letter I sent to my insurance. And so it's sort of personal to our case, but maybe you can take pieces of that letter and use it for your own. Okay, so I just want to let you know that if you know someone or you yourself are interested in PGD, feel free to contact me. I have people contact me all the time on email, and it's kind of neat. Sometimes I'll get an email from someone just asking a general question, and then I'll hear from them like 6 months later, well, we're thinking about doing it. And then I'll hear from them 9 months later, well, we're going to do it now. And I'll email back, well, let me know, and we'll stay in contact through them getting pregnant and having a baby. And it's really kind of exciting because it feels like my little PGD family. So I love to help people and to give support and some information, whatever information I can offer. So please feel free to go on my website, hdfreewithpgd.com. Oh, it's right there. hdfreewithpgd.com. And my own email is on there as well, like I said before. Now, I wanted to be sure to leave a little time for questions. So we have about 10 minutes. Does anyone have a question? Yeah.
What happens if it's the male that's the carrier?
It's exactly the same process because in order to do PGD, they have to test the embryo, and that actually is after the egg and the sperm meet. So it doesn't matter whether the HD family Lyme comes from the egg or from the sperm, because once it's in the embryo, that's where they do the testing. So it's all the same procedure, except that, of course, his wife would be the one going through all of the IVF stuff, of course. So yeah, it's exactly the same.
Okay. It's more love on the part of the wife, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You said that you had twins. Did you implant one egg and split, or did you implant two?
We transferred 3, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We could have had triplets, I suppose. Yeah. And we talked about that. And our fertility doctor said that he'll transfer you know, however many we want, but that he doesn't do selective reduction, just personally. Was his rule. And so we decided that if we had more than 3, we would just transfer 3, and then we would freeze the rest. Now, I have been told, and this could be right or wrong, probably depending on who you talk to, but I've been told that an embryo, after it goes through a biopsy process where it actually is poked in the needle, all that, that freezing and defrosting is a little less successful after going through that. And so that's something to consider too. That if you only want to transfer 2 and you get 3 healthy ones, well, you might want to consider putting all 3 in, because that third, even if you freeze it, it may not end up, defrosting very well. So yeah, a lot of times our doctor will just put that last one in there. So that's something to consider too. Yes?
Is it technically, even though they don't do it, is it technically possible to test for the CAG repeat, and why don't they?
That's a good question, and we're just recently finding out about that, that they're not able to test for a CAG repeat with one single stem cell. I don't know why. Does anyone know why? Yeah?
You need a large quantity. Like, your genetic testing that you start,
Yeah.
samples, your DNA samples from the parents. It takes weeks to develop the amount of cells to find the repeat and the marker.
Oh.
So just one tiny, tiny cell, which is the smallest unit of life. You don't have enough. You would have to grow that and grow that and grow that. And since it's a time-sensitive period to implant the eggs, there's not enough time with the research we have now to find out the repeat.
Wow. Oh, well, thank you for that. That's good to know. Yeah. Because at this point, just using the marker seems to be very effective, but it's possible that at some point that could be another way to test, I suppose. So we'll be watching for that. Any other questions?
I have one, Stacy.
Yeah.
You said that your doctor didn't use a process that was called selective something. I forget what you said.
Yeah, that's an IVF term, selective reduction. It's when you go through IVF and PGD if it's necessary, and then you come away with many embryos that are healthy and eligible for transfer. Sometimes people will transfer as many as they can, a lot of them, and then end up pregnant with 5 or 6 babies, and they'll selectively reduce that amount of babies that are viable. So once again, that's another personal choice of whether that's right for you or not. So that's just what my doctor had said. And so we had to take into consideration that. I don't know if I'd be able to do that personally anyway, but I suppose that's an option for some people.
Thank you.
Yes?
Did they test your husband's family markers too, or just the AG positive?
They didn't look for markers in my husband's family, but they did take his DNA, I think, in order to determine the difference between his and mine. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Any more? Anyone want to share anything? Any personal experiences? Or yeah.
What was the final cost of the process?
I think for us it was about, we ended up paying about $5,000 personally, and the insurance paid the other 70%. So it was a lot. It was not cheap. It was probably closer to 30 or so. But that's because we went with like the best I could find, the best doctor and everything. I considered that important. So depends on where you go. Some places it's less. I mean, I've heard of it as low as $8,000 or $9,000 for one cycle. But I would want to check success rates and all that and make sure that that really is a true and honest, doctor trying to do the right thing. So yeah. Yeah.
Stacy, as positive as this seems, in your experience in talking with people, what seems to be some of the reasons that they don't do this?
I think that this is one of many options that you have when you're looking at growing your family. I would think that if you're a family that maybe you find out about Huntington's after you already have children that are already at risk, that is a position that I don't know about, because we didn't have kids yet before we considered this. And so I would think that for some people, they may, wonder about, well, what will my kids that are at risk think if I then do this for their younger sibling, So every person's situation is different, and that's why I recommended think about your own personal foundation. What's going on in your life? What do you believe? What are your... because I think that some people may be opposed to this as well, depending on personal beliefs. And so all of those things it's fair for a person to make their own choices. I'm not trying to convince anyone that this is what you should do at all. I'm just putting this out there for anyone that may be interested in learning more about it. Because everyone needs to make that decision for their own, personal situation.
But it sounds like it would be very difficult for a layperson to have enough
understand?
knowledge to really be able to discuss it.
Yeah.
So is there a place they can go for that kind of help?
Well, that's why I put my website out there, because after I had learned so much going through all of this, I thought, what can I do with all this information? And there were so many people, even within the medical community, who didn't know much about this. And so I tried to put it out there, and actually I worked with our team of some researchers and some doctors at UC Irvine. That's where I live, down there. And they helped me put this together. And the questions on here are sort of what we all put together so that we can simply say, this is a first step, and this can maybe help you to move in the direction. You'll find that now most of the Huntington's Centers of Excellence will know about this now. And a lot of times they'll point you to me, actually, because I try to speak in a layperson terms and help people to understand it. So, yeah, if you know of anyone that has those questions, give them my email, give them my website. Because everything I said today is on the website. There's even more detail, kind of crazy, gory detail about what it all was like and everything. So if you're interested, read it. It's almost too much on there. Yes?
Last time I heard you talk, when you brought your babies in, probably 3 years ago or so, the major thing I came away from was, well, I heard all of what you said, but you also were talking about eliminating these types of diseases from the planet. I mean, the potential to do that through what you're doing. And I didn't get that message here at all today. I mean, like if everybody, do you remember saying that?
Well, I suppose obviously if everyone did this, then, there wouldn't be any babies born with Huntington's. But
is there any direction headed that way with the organization or
No.
other organizations?
No, and maybe I've learned since then that this is not for everyone. This is just for those who, choose it for their own personal life. And so there are always going to be new children born that are at risk. And for those of us who do choose PGD, then it's a wonderful blessing. But others, it may not be right for them. So I don't assume that it will go in that direction. I mean, that's sort of in a perfect world, I suppose, but I don't know, how can you say that when some people disagree with this? It may not be perfect for them. So that's hard to say. But some of the research that they're going to be talking about this afternoon is pretty incredible, too. I mean, talking about Huntington silencing and some of the other things that they're looking at right now. So, I mean, we've got it coming from both directions. So there's a lot of hope going on there, too. Yeah. Yes?
What's been the response to your website? It's been up for how many years, and what's the response been?
It's been about, well, I've had both, and mostly it's been good, because usually if people disagree, they don't contact me. But like when I went, but sometimes when I'm speaking in a public forum and there are those in the area who don't agree, I've had some people come up to me and say some pretty strong things, but that's okay. That I don't mind. That's their own personal opinion, and that's fine. And guess what? I've got 2 healthy kids, and I'm so thankful for that.
I meant more in terms of like, say, people with other diseases, doctors, genetic counselors, people who are learning about this from your website. Have you been getting a response like that too?
Oh, from others that are
Yeah.
I have got, yes, and I've gotten even people that have other diseases, especially. That's been a big hit too. And yeah, I mean, anyone. Let's all join in the conversation and let's all learn more about it, because this can help in so many ways. Yeah, so I think we're out of time now. But I really enjoyed talking to you about this today, and I'm going to be here all day, so please come up to me. If you have any questions, please email me, check out the website, and I just hope that you all have a great day. Thank you.